Good afternoon. My name is Leroy Bell. I am a reference specialist in the Researcher and Reference Services Division of the Library of Congress. This presentation is intended to be an overview about selected resources in the field of political science that may be of interest to you at the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress collections are rich in primary and secondary resources that are available in many different formats. To get started, let me give you some background information on the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress was founded in 1800, making it the oldest federal cultural institution in the nation. It is the largest library in the world with more than 171 million items. The library is the research arm of the U.S. Congress and the home of the U.S. Copyright Office. Each working day, the library receives some 15,000 items and adds more than 10,000 items to its collections. Next, I will be giving you a sample of the vastness of the library's holdings. We have over 25 million catalog books, 4 million audio materials, disc tapes, talking books, and other recorded formats, 74.5 million manuscripts, 5.6 million maps, 17.4 million microforms, 1.9 million moving images, 8.2 million items of sheet music, 17.3 million visual materials, and more than 470 languages are represented in the library's global collections. To house the vast collections, the Library of Congress occupies 3 buildings on Capitol Hill. The Thomas Jefferson Building, built in 1897, the John Adams Building, built in 1938, the James Madison Memorial Building, which was completed in 1981. And we have about 3 off-site storage facilities. Now, within these 3 buildings, the library has over 20 different reading rooms, each dedicated to offering collections and services in specific formats, subjects, and languages. Next, I will give a few examples of specific collections that may be useful in the study of political science. These collections exist in many of the specialized reading rooms within the Library of Congress, and they include the general collections, the manuscript collections, motion picture and TV collections, law collections, personal interviews and other oral history collections, web archiving collections, digital collections, and subscription databases. The collection that I will be reviewing first is the general collections. The general collections include books, pamphlets, journals, newspapers, and other serial publications. The Library of Congress has the largest national collections of material dealing with the study of American political science. The library has major holdings in United States race relations, African-American politics and government. The Library of Congress has a very strong collection of material dealing with international relations. The book collections are complemented by printed archives and documents, historical serials, and by the collections of personal papers of diplomats and secretaries of state. During this next section, I will be reviewing some manuscript collections. The wealth of these collections is beyond your greatest expectations and provides opportunities for previously unexplored research. The manuscript reading room provides access to 12 million manuscript collections totaling 65 million items to include, and not limited to, the papers of 23 presidents the papers of individuals who have served as Secretary of State, civil rights activists, and organizations. These collections also include the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights Records, which is a civil rights organization, the papers of two well-known political figures, Patricia Robert Harris, who's a diplomat and a cabinet officer, Senator Edward Brooke, United States Senator, Hugh H. Smythe and Mabel H. Smythe, diplomats. We have the papers of Barnyard Rustin, civil rights activists, the National Urban League Records, civil rights organization, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Records, is a civil rights group, the Thurgood Marshall Papers, who's a Supreme Court Justice, James Foreman Papers, civil rights activists, the Annie Tannehill Papers, Urban League official, Frederick Douglass Papers, abolitionist and diplomat, A. Philip Randolph Papers, labor union official and civil rights leader, Roy Wilkins Papers, civil rights leader, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People Records, civil rights organization, the Arthur B. Springard Papers, civil rights leaders, and the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porter Records, African American labor union. Next, the Moving Image Research Center has a number of collections on political science topics, such as presidential inaugurations, footage of inaugurations from William McKinley to the present day, civil rights, television news programs, as well as films about civil rights and race relations, political conventions, footage of Democratic and Republican national conventions, films of House and Senate, and Meet the Press, the NBC News program. Another important collection is the Law Library. With approximately 2.9 million volumes, the Law Library's collection of primary and secondary resources constitute the largest legal collection in the world. The Law Library is a depository for the complete record of American law. U.S. Congress bills, resolutions, hearings, and other documents, U.S. federal and state government documents, legal newspapers of major U.S. cities, records and briefs of the U.S. Supreme Court and courts of appeal. And this includes a large collection of foreign law. Progressing on with our overview of LC collections, many personal interviews and oral history collections can be found in the American Folklife Center. And I have highlighted 4 collections. The National Visionary Leadership Project. This collection consists of videotapes, video cassettes, about 300 full-length oral history interviews with noted African-American leaders. The next collection is the Voices of the Civil Rights Project collection. This collection consists of oral history interviews, sound and video recordings, photographs, and manuscript material documenting memories of 20th century civil rights movements in the United States. The third one is the Inauguration 2009 Sermons and Orations Project collection. This collection includes manuscripts, letters, sermons, orations, church programs, audio and video collections, photographs, and other graphic materials created by the public in response to the 2009 election and inauguration of President Barack Obama. And the next one is the Civil Rights History Project collection. This collection includes 108 film oral history interviews with 136 participants in the civil rights movement in the United States and related documentation. Moving forward, with electronic resources available, the Library of Congress Web Archives manages, preserves, and provides access to archived web content selected by subject experts from across the library, so that it will be available for researchers today and in the future. Among the archives that may be of interest is the United States Congressional Web Archive, includes member websites from the House of Representatives and Senate, as well as House and Senate committee websites. We also have the African Government Web Archive. This archive provides links to information from key African government ministries, institutions, and organizations from 51 countries in Africa south of the Sahara. The next archive is the United States Elections Web Archive. This includes campaign websites archived weekly during the election season since the year 2000. This documents sites associated with presidential, congressional, and gubernatorial elections. The other web archive that we have is Protest Against Racism Web Archive. This archive includes websites documenting American and global expressions relating to institutional and systematic racism, police brutality, and unsettled issues. In addition to web archiving, the Library of Congress online digital collections includes maps, photographs, letters, diaries, newspapers, sound recording, and films. Here I have highlighted a few online digital collections. Frontline Diplomacy, the Foreign Affairs Oral History Collection of the Association for Diplomatic Studies and Training. This collection makes available interview transcripts from the oral history archives of the Association of Diplomatic Studies and Training. The next collection I've highlighted is the Mary Church Terrell papers. These are the papers of educator, lecturer, suffragist, and civil rights activists. Another collection is the African American Perspectives, material selected from the Rare Book Collection. This collection includes sermons on racial pride and political activism, annual reports of charitable, educational, and political organization, speeches by members of Congress. To conclude, I will be reviewing subscription databases at the Library of Congress. The Library of Congress subscribes to over 1,000 subscription databases, which offers indexes to journals, information on library holdings, and other resources in a wide range of subject areas. Among them are political science and international relations subject-specific databases, such as PAIS, Worldwide Political Science Abstracts, JSTOR, Columbia International Affairs Online, Policy File, and ProQuest Congressional. Multidisciplinary databases include Academic Search Complete, ProQuest Research Library. Regional and cultural Pacific databases include EXX Africa, Business Risk Intelligence, Black Studies Center, LGBT Thought and Culture, ProQuest History Vault, Race Relations in America, and Africa Confidential. The library also has access to numerous historical newspapers, such as ProQuest Historical Newspapers and African American newspapers from Newsbank Redex. My last slide includes some links that may be useful to you. Library of Congress website, there's the URLs for it. The LC Online Catalog, which provides you with access to library materials. The Ask a Librarian program, so if you have a question, you can send your question in and it will be routed to a appropriate subject specialist. Digital collections, these are the collections that we have available online that are free to the public. Our subscription databases, This is a list where you can see what subscription databases that are available at the Library of Congress. Our web archives, you can see what web archive databases that are available, and archival finding aids. You're dealing with manuscripts or anything in that format, you probably want to look here. And also we have a hefty collection of Library of Congress research guides. And I'll give you a minute to take a look at these URLs. And if you have any questions, you can email me at lbell@loc.gov. Thank you.
Thank you, Leroy. I'm going to share my screen now and appreciate the opportunity to share. Can everyone see this?
Yes.
So thank you all. We're delighted to be with INCOPES today and to share the opportunities that we have for scholars, not only in terms of the research at the Library of Congress and the resources there, but also the residential opportunities that we have at the John W. Kluge Center within the library. I'm Janna Deitz. I lead the outreach and partnerships efforts for the Kluge Center, and would like to just share a little bit of background about the Kluge Center and its history. The Kluge Center is a scholarly center within the library and has had around 1,000 scholars in residence in its 20 years. Its past scholars have included former heads of state and presidents, including names like Václav Havel of the Czech Republic and Fernando Cardoso of Brazil. We've also had emerging scholars who later became some of the most provocative thought leaders of our time, including individuals like Ibram X. Kendi, who had also conducted research as Kluge scholars at the library. 2 decades ago, the largest gift at the time ever given to the Library of Congress in the amount of $60 million was given by John W. Kluge, who wished to promote, support, and celebrate research that was important to understanding the human condition. He wanted to support research that was designed to be accessible to the public and to the broader policymaking community. That gift took shape specifically as a center that offers residential scholarly experiences housed inside the historic and beautiful Jefferson Building of the Library of Congress. Its location is important, I think, in understanding the commitment that the center has to supporting scholarship with a public engagement focus. I think that's a nice connection with the theme of the INCOPES conference this year as well. The Kluge Center is literally located just outside the library's beautiful main reading room, and I'll leave it to Jesse Holland to talk more about what it was like to be able to do research in that environment. But just so you know, Kluge scholars have full access to all library resources. They can attend library events and collections. They have well-appointed offices and intern support. And we also ensure that they have regular interaction with other scholars in this community at the library. And they also are able to access just a wide variety of national and international players in the policy world due to the center's location in Washington, D.C. And so this is truly, an inspiring location for research and writing, especially for those that are interested in public impact. And so one of the themes of the Kluge Center is that we connect thought and action. This is our main thought and our main mission, excuse me. And we do that by, again, supporting scholarship in the human sciences and making sure to project that to very wide audiences through our public events, congressional events, and social media. And just to keep in mind here, when we say widely distributing the impact of this publicly engaged research, one of the ways that we do that is through library channels. And so we are able to promote the research of scholars that are in residence at Kluge to a listserv of about 35,000 through our .gov delivery service. We also use social media, and we have library blogs. And so that is truly one of our emphasis to get research out to the public. and to policymakers. Again, the two categories of events that we host, we have events for the public, which include bringing in authors who are addressing critical issues of our time, and to hold events for the public discussing those books. We also have a series called Conversations on the Future of Democracy, where we may have a theme of a specific challenge that, for example, that we're facing today, that we bring in scholars to discuss. More recently, and during the past year, we've included a series that examines in detail the various pillars of democracy. And so we've had series and we've had scholars and practitioners in conversation on issues like the administrative state, the state of Congress. We'll have upcoming events on the media, and I believe also universities and academia. So it's a very broad range of understanding of the kinds of conversations that we have about democracy. We also, for our scholars and residents, we also have events for Congress. Specifically with our library chairs, there are opportunities to host what we call breakfast conversations with thought leaders, and to bring in for members of Congress. Those may include our chairs. They may include a very influential scholar at the moment, or an author. And so we have that connection. We also present webinars to members of Congress and their staff that bring the expertise of Kluge scholars to that audience. And then we also, sometimes our scholars will also be requested to meet with members about a particular topic. And so those are the things that we coordinate with the library's Congressional Relations Office. But I'm hoping you're seeing that this is, when we say publicly engaged and research that's intended to impact, these are the ways that we express that at the Kluge Center. Just to show you some examples of the featured authors that we've had more recently, we have had Martha Jones, an historian who discussed and is in residence, who discussed her book called Vanguard on Black women and the fight for suffrage. She also, if you may know, is someone who has a 4-book deal, I believe, right now, in terms of of her approach and her lens to understanding history. So that's an important way that we share the work that our scholars are doing. Melvin Rogers and Jack Turner also had a book come out last year, I believe, African American Political Thought. We had a conversation with these two authors, and this was a fantastic collection of about 30, I believe, individuals that have been influential in shaping African American political thought at the time, and also now and for the future. So that was another example of a scholar that we highlighted. An upcoming scholar that we're going to be highlighting is Tamika Nunley, who is an historian and who has a book out that we will be in conversation with her to discuss this book, At the Threshold of Liberty, on women's situation in DC during the time of the Civil War. And so this is in line with the DC Emancipation Day. And this is another example of an event, a scholar connection that we make at the Kluge Center. Just some examples of research conducted by Kluge scholars here that may be of interest. And this, I think, fits well with what Leroy said about uses of the collections and the resources that the library offers. So these are the kinds of topics, and you can see they range from history, looking at NAACP and social movements, to the civil rights movement, as well as Freedmen's Village. I'll let Jesse speak about that. That's his project, and the 1619 and the Making of America as well. And so this is the kind of the depth of research that can be made stronger by access to the library collections that Leroy mentioned. In terms of our chair opportunities and becoming a scholar at the Kluge Center, our chairs are library appointed chairs. They are appointed by Dr. Hayden, and they are a prestigious selection process that begins importantly with a nomination process. So folks need to be nominated to become a Kluge chair. It goes through a highly selective evaluation, and then ultimately, as I said, Dr. Hayden would nominate those chairs, and those appointments are generally for about 11 to 12 months, with 5 to 7 chairs serving about one time. time. And depending on the type of chair, there are also opportunities for formal speaking engagements with Congress, Hill staff, other scholars, or the public. And some of the examples of the Kluge chairs that you see include these areas of North and South, the cultures of the global North, the global South, American law, technology and society, modern culture. We have some named chairs as well for Kissinger and foreign policy, the McGuire chair in ethics, the Bloomberg chair in astrobiology, exploration and scientific innovation. That is one that, if you'll see at the bottom, it's denoted as needing an application process. It's the only one on this list that goes through that process. We also have emphasis in Russia and China, as well as early Americas. We have a category that is a little bit different in the sense that it allows for a shorter time period in residence. And that's the distinguished visiting scholar. So just because someone may be interested in working or researching at the library, but aren't able to commit to that full year. But if someone has a semester, the distinguished visiting scholars, as we call them, the DVS, this category is one that is amenable to a very flexible schedule. That said, any and all of those chairs, once they are appointed, we work very closely with the academic institutions that our scholars are associated with to make sure it fits with their schedule. The Kluge Fellowship, this is another category. The fellowships are, you'll see they're collection specific named opportunities here. These are opportunities for younger emerging scholars to be in residence. Many of these fall in the postdoc category, and they are specific to key topics. We do have some partnerships as well that you can see represented here, the most recent being a partnership with Harvard and its program in Islamic law. The last example that's bolded on this slide I would like to point out is the Hewlett Fellowship in Governing Institutions. This is a newer fellowship that will be offered for 2 fellows to serve in residence who are specifically an emerging scholar that is looking at newer perspectives in terms of how we the questions that we ask about our governing institutions, specifically the executive branch and the legislative branch. So that's a very broad category that I think a lot of scholars here would perhaps be eligible for. And so I'd encourage you to contact us if you're interested in that fellowship as well. The URLs, again, just as Leroy did, I'm putting those at the bottom of those slides for reference. And just some examples. I don't want to spend much time on this, but I did want to say that Leroy did a fantastic job of showing all the different resources and collections available for really, really good work, research. And here's an example of kind of what that looks like, right? This is the Kluge Chair in Countries and Cultures of the South, a past chair, Rolena Adorno. And here you can see some of the examples of the kinds of information she can access, the kinds of collections with photographs that are useful to your work, to your writing, to books that you might be publishing. And this is, again, some examples from the prints and photographs collection. An example with Jesse here in terms of, again, and using an example of a picture from Freedman's Village in Arlington, again, showing how the manuscripts, the prints and photographs, as well as all of the other collections that Leroy mentioned are useful for our scholars. Another aspect to the Kluge Center that I think denotes the prestige of the center is the Kluge Prize, and it shows you more about, I think, the purpose of what the center is designed to do. So we do recognize a leading scholar who has developed, as this slide shows, unique insights into the forces that have shaped and continue to shape humankind. So that's across multiple disciplines. It certainly includes political science and history and social sciences, but it's really a way to mark the importance of what the kinds of research that we focus on is how important that is. John Kluge wanted to recognize the research of public import, and he did this with a $500,000 prize that was intended to be on par with a prize like the Nobel. And so I just wanted to point out that this is another aspect of activity that we do in the center to recognize and promote this type of engaged research. The most recent recipient in 2020 is Danielle Allen at Harvard University. This was the campaign that she developed for her time as the Kluge Prize winner. And the theme was Our Common Purpose, a campaign for civic strength. But this shows you again the kinds of support that we would give to the Kluge Prize winner and promoting their research with various lectures, workshops, and a significant undertaking in terms of promoting that through advertisements and public advertisements. I did want to say a little something about the impact, not only on research, but on the professional experience of being a Kluge scholar. Repeatedly, we see that our scholars emphasize that their time at Kluge was transformational, that they did some of their best work, and that they were able to get, projects out the door and books published. Another benefit that is often something that I think our scholars see or understand as well is that they are able to expand and grow their network with other scholars, with the library, with Kluge, with Congress, and with other DC-based organizations while they are here. And those networks are networks that do persist as you return back to your institution. You can take that back for your own professional development, and it's also something for your subfield that you can share with your students to help them grow as they engage in research and try to make their own public impacts. Kluge is very much committed to staying connected with its alums, but I just wanted to say that this was another aspect, aside from research, that is important to what our Kluge alumni are telling us after they leave their time with the library. I wanted to take a minute to share with you some student opportunities that are also important and fairly new to the library that would be of interest to anyone on this call and their students. We have a new program, the Archives, History, and Heritage Advanced Internship Program, otherwise known as AHA. And this program is now in its second year. It's a hybrid program, so students can intern both in remote and on-site projects. You'll see the eligibility there. It is part of a broader effort at the library under Dr. Hayden's leadership to assure that the library collections and resources are as descriptive of the full American narrative as possible. And so this is an internship that is in line with that goal. It is a paid internship, as you'll see. It is competitive in the sense, or selective in the sense that there are 15 interns chosen, but it's an incredible opportunity, complete with professional development training. And I would highly recommend that any of you share this with your students. We welcome applications across the board for many disciplines to participate in this internship. And again, the email at the bottom is aha@loc.gov. Here are some examples of the program focus that this program is doing. These are pictures taken from interns' specific projects. And again, it is to build an awareness of how we analyze or organize historical records. Also to make sure that there are some practices and skills that we are using to, again, have a more inclusive story of the American experience. And then lastly, to heighten the visibility of the resources, many of which, again, Leroy mentioned earlier, but to make sure that that folks understand that these collections are really important in terms of accessing them for research to further our understanding of the inclusive American experience. And then lastly, again, there's a blog. There's an easy way to stay connected with this student program, and encourage anyone to subscribe to that blog. Again, you have the URL there, and the program is AHA. I'm going to close with just a listing of some of the recent events that recent and upcoming events that we've offered for the public. These are now online on our YouTube playlist that you can see at the bottom. Again, you can see a lot of our public events through our website, through the library's event page. And that's my presentation. I will now kick this over to Jesse to talk about the Kluge Scholar Experience. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. Once again, my name is Jesse Holland. I right now am an assistant professor at George Washington University, and of course, a former distinguished visiting scholar at the Kluge Center. And I don't want to take too much of your time because I know there's probably a lot of great questions out there, but I wanted to take a few minutes to actually talk about the experience of working at the Kluge Center. Janna stole a little bit of my thunder by bringing up my project that I worked on there, but for me, the Kluge Center was a great place to bridge both my writing, which is my upcoming book, and the research that I needed to do for it. So Janna told you a little bit about what I am working on, which is a book called Sanctuary, The Untold Story of Freedmen's Village. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about Freedmen's Village, and then I'll show you a little bit of the research I was able to do at the Kluge Center. So Freedmen's Village was an African-American town that was founded by the released slaves of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. Many people know that Robert Lee was the head of the Confederate forces in the Civil War, but what many people don't know is that Robert E. Lee lived right next to the US Capitol for a lot of his life. In fact, he lived across the Potomac River in Arlington, Virginia, and he lived in a house called Arlington House. Well, of course, when he becomes general of the Confederate forces, you can't live across the river from the capital of the opposing side. So Robert E. Lee moves from Arlington, Virginia to Richmond, Virginia. But when he left his house in Arlington, the US Army crossed the Potomac River and took it. And part of what they did with his lands in Arlington was they gave part of it to his slaves in that he left behind. And those slaves took that land and built their own town called Freedmen's Village. Now, Freedmen's Village does not exist today. However, we know it by its now more famous name, which is Arlington National Cemetery. So I use my time at the Kluge Center to do research on this unknown African-American history. And I want to show you a little of the things I was able to come up with while at the Kluge Center. So let me share my screen here. So this is a little bit of what I was able to come up with while I was at the Kluge Center. You heard Leroy tell you about all of the great databases that you have access to. Well, of course, we know when we're writing about history, we want as many source documents as we can, and that includes photographs, paintings, whatever's available. Now, since this is material that I'm working on from the Civil War era, there aren't many photographs available, so you have to depend on what's available in the media. And I was actually able to find, while doing my Kluge research, a drawing of what Freedmen's Village actually looked like from Harper's Bazaar, going back and looking at the material that was available that was available at Harper's Bazaar. So I was able to find this material at Harper's Bazaar, being able to looking at some of what was available to them. Let me make sure I get my presentation there. Okay, all right. So I was also able to find in documents at the Library of Congress some drawings of what the houses at Freedmen's Village look like. And this was an advertisement for one of the houses that was available at Freedman's Village. And even through this, now I know how much they were charging for it. As you can see in the drawing, $3. This is something I did not know before my Kluge research, but I was able to find out by going through the material that the Library of Congress holds. I was also, through the prints and photographs collection, able to find not one. This is a picture of Freedman's Village where you can actually see the inhabitants. And through research, I was able to figure out that they're actually all looking and reading out of a Bible in this photograph. So for years, I've operated under the assumption that this was the only photograph of the people who lived in Freedman's Village. But during my time at the Kluge Center, I was able to actually find this one as well, showing a different view of Freedman's Village, but you could still see the same houses that we saw in both this photograph and these two drawings. So this, as far as I know, this is the second photograph ever found of the people who lived in Freedman's Village, which gives, while as a writer, we know words are great, but pictures say so much more. And I'm able to base some of what I'm writing on this photograph that I had never seen before. Even after having known about Freedman's Village for 10 years, I had never found this photograph until I had time at the Kluge Center to be able to go ahead and start my research. So that's just some of the few of the things I was able to find during my time at the Kluge Center. I also want to echo both everything Leroy and Janna said about working at the Kluge Center. First of all, the resources of the Library of Congress are so extensive that you can spend your entire career there and never find everything that's related to what you're doing. And the bonus part of being at the Kluge Center is that you have access to all of these resources. You have access to all of these collections. You even have access to these collections from home. Now, I will say that part of my time at the Kluge Center included the pandemic. So much of the research I had to do included being able to access these databases from my house here in Washington, D.C. But now that everything is opening-ish back up, you now have all this material available to you in person. Also, as Janna said, the scholars who work at the Library of Congress at the Kluge Center are frankly one big family. My Kluge Center experience ended a year or two, maybe 2 years ago. It's all pandemic, it's all blurring together now. But I still keep in contact with both the Kluge Center staff and other members of my cohort at the Kluge Center. We're always seeing each other on television or seeing somebody has a good article out, and we're all on Facebook together, and we're passing along notes and congratulating each other. Even to this day, the people I worked with at the Kluge Center, both the staff and my cohorts, are all still friends of mine. And I already know that whenever I get a chance to jump back into my story of Freedman's Village, because now I'm debating whether I want to write a book or do a documentary. Whenever I get ready to jump back into it full time, I know the material at the Library of Congress is there, and the Kluge Center staff is there, willing and ready to help me. So I want to make sure we leave time for specific questions about what they do. I keep saying, I still think of us as we at the Kluge Center, but I want to make sure I leave time for questions about what the Kluge Center does and how it helps people do their research. So I'll stop here, and then I'll turn it back over to Janna and to see if there are any specific questions for me, Leroy, or anyone about the Kluge Center experience.
If there's anyone on the call that would like to pose a question either about resources, collections, or about the fellowship or chair opportunities. Valeria, I see your hand.
I muted myself. That was perfect. Dr. Holland, thank you for sharing. I wondered, first of all, everybody, Janna, it's good to see you, and thank you all for the presentations. Dr. Holland, I wonder, what do you think made the difference in your selection? What was it, do you think, about your project that that made you the one that was chosen? And I suppose I'm looking for, what was the refrain to getting selected or making it to the top of a stack? Maybe others on the call might answer that too, but I am wondering, what do you think it was?
Now, I will tell you that this is my opinion only, and Janna's probably the better person to tell you what the criteria is for becoming a part of the Kluge Center programs. But I do think one of the things that helped me stand out was that I was treading new ground. It's not, I picked a project that hasn't been talked about ad nauseum, that there isn't much scholarly research on. There have been a couple of dissertations on Freedmen's Village. There's been maybe a paper or a magazine article or two, but no one's really attempted to do an in-depth study of who the people were, what their experience was like, and how, frankly, it helped shape the capital region. So if I was offering someone advice about getting into the Kluge Center, I would say pick a project that has not been talked about as much before, that you can look at it in a scholarly way, and that the Library of Congress has resources where the Library of Congress can help you. When going into my project, I already knew that the Library of Congress had some material that I could look at. For example, the Freedmen's Village was actually a military-run village. They were under the auspices of the U.S. Army, and the superintendent of Freedmen's Village, the Army colonel that was put in charge of it, his personal papers are at the Library of Congress. They're not something that can be taken out. You actually have to go in. They're very fragile. You have to put on the gloves, you have to put on the mask, and then you can carefully read what he wrote about Freedmen's Village. I was able to say in my application that I know the material, some of the material that I need is at the Library of Congress, so that will help me use my time efficiently while I'm there, instead of having to come in and say, I don't know what I'm looking for, can y'all help me? So I would say, look for a project that breaks new ground, and look for a project that the Library of Congress has material that you can use. Now I'll throw it over to Janna to see if I'm right about any of that.
Jesse, you're always right. No, I think Jesse did a really good job. The only thing I would add or just expand on is the fact that the more specific you can be, Valeria, in terms of the collections that you think will inform your research, right? So one of the things that we can see are going back again to Leroy's presentation that's so helpful here. I'm just going to use as an example. Someone could say, well, there's a wealth of civil rights research, and collections at the library, which is absolutely true. But if you're able to say, I'm looking at the Myrtilla Minor papers, or I'm looking at this specific collection of papers, the more specific you can be, I think that's something that does stand out, just like Jesse said. The other thing to follow up on what he said as well is that in the application process, I think that, he mentioned this was something that was new, right? That his approach to it was different. It was and that there was something unique about that. That's also, I think, in general, a plus. It's not to say that there couldn't be other research questions that have been asked before, but that you're looking at them through a different lens. That's also considered, and that the way in which you're doing that is being helped by specific resources at the library. Those are the kinds of things that I think are playing out. And going back to the mission of the center, that this is publicly engaged research. The idea is to inform the broader public, to inform those in the policy world. And I think that's also apparent, I think, with Jesse's work as well. And my vote is to do both, the book and the documentary, please. Any other questions? Corey, did anything strike you from the presentation?
I actually wouldn't mind if you could speak a little bit more about the opportunities for undergraduates, the internships in particular. Really excited about that possibility, and hoping to share this information with them.
Oh, please. I think that's a really, thank you for asking that question. We highlighted one particular new program that has grant funding behind it, and that includes, these are paid internships, right, for these students. That's through a selective process, and many of the internship programs for the library more generally, of course, are. one of the things the library did really well for your students, because you're out on the West Coast, right? Right. So one thing to keep in mind is that you'll see that some of these internships, while people are back, as Jesse said, we may be back in person, we are still, I think you'll still see a commitment to providing hybrid or some sort of remote option for access for students, because so many students were able to do work on digitizing, as Jesse was saying, some of the digitized collections. They were able to do that and support that work in areas that they're interested in. Another program that I will say that I'll share with you that I worked with once I joined the Kluge Center is a program called the Junior Fellows Program. And the Junior Fellows Program is another, summer, basically May to August, I'm guessing, kind of program that is also designed for advanced undergraduates as well as graduate students to work on a concrete project with a staff member, mentor. I had someone that worked on alumni engagement with the Kluge Center, for example, and some digital media kinds of things for us. So those are a couple of options. And I would also just tell you that there are other opportunities around the library as well. I'm speaking from Kluge and the ones I've worked with, but if you have students that are interested in law, for example, the law library, different aspects of that. And Leroy, do you know of any other additional have you worked with interns in your area?
Maybe a few that were doing, that were assisting some of the Kluge scholars. They were kind of carrying out their assignments and trying to find material for them, but not necessarily the junior fellows. I think they were probably dealing with basically primary source, manuscripts, prints and photographs, and even copyright. Okay.
And I will,
Leroy's right.
let me just add in
You have an
that,
intern?
that one of the privileges of being one of the Kluge scholars is that you do get intern support. So I have at least 2 interns that I already know they're going to be in the thank you to either the book or the documentary, or as Janna said, both when it comes out. And I also want to just make sure I say that while you're in the Kluge Center, it does not divorce you from the rest of the Library of Congress. So there are always other events, other scholars, other people working on different projects, maybe not in the Kluge Center, but still in the Library of Congress where you can attend. For example, it was at the Library of Congress where I first met Jason Reynolds, who's now like one of the top children's authors in the nation. That was the first time he and I actually had a chance to sit down and talk together. So just because you're in the Kluge Center does not mean you can't take advantage of all of the other programming that goes on at the Library of Congress. And one last thing, and I'll throw it back to Janna. Being at the Kluge Center was the first time for me since college that my life was about pure research and not the pressure of you need to publish, you need to write, you have to find out something today and write about it next week, or find out something today and write about it tomorrow, where you were actually able to do in-depth research and be around researchers and historians like yourself, where you can ask for help and help others in their research as well, which was a great, one of the best times of my life, being around, sitting around a table and talking to other researchers about what they're doing and how we can all help each other. So just that part of it was still, I miss it to this day, to be honest with you. Now I'm back in the world of academia, perish or publish. I really miss that.
Jesse, I'm surprised no one's asked you about that distracting mask that I see behind on your I think I know what that's about.
You know what that's about. So.
I know, I've got the books.
Yeah.
Let's see. Kimberly and Claudia, do you have any questions on the call? Just want to give you the opportunity to jump in.
I'm just enjoying listening to and Dr. Holland, he stopped his presentation. There were more slides and I wanted to see the rest of the presentation. But I did have a thought, and I guess this dovetail with Dr. Holland's talking about when you're working. For a lot of scholars who are at teaching institutions, by the time you look up and think about these type of opportunities, I looked through the eligibility criteria, and some of them have a 7-year time frame. And I thought, well, this would have been a great opportunity. However, you're outside of the 7-year time frame. So it seems to me that getting the information out sooner to scholars in terms of what we do in terms of teaching, to let our students know in advance that these opportunities exist, I think seems to be a challenge that I find, and particularly for those who are in their careers, even though they may be, middle in their career, these opportunities are just getting on their radars. And so you kind of feel like you've missed an opportunity. So I'm glad to hear I lived in Pentagon City. My husband's a commander, retired Navy. So we lived there, and Arlington is right there. So I haven't heard of Freeman's Village, and so I'm excited about your research and about the potential book / documentary to come to learn more. So I thank you for sharing that, and I do have my Library of Congress membership card. I think I have to renew it because after the pandemic hit, couldn't go, and I think my expiration date has come. But I do enjoy going to the library and doing research. So thank you.
And Claudia, I will tell you, the Kluge Center is right outside of the beautiful reading room, which is if you haven't been inside the main reading room at the Library of Congress, it's one of the most beautiful rooms in all of Washington, D.C. So make sure you get by there. And Claudia, I will also tell you, I married a retired commander in the Navy as well, and we live in Bowie. So.
But let me ask you a question, since you said part of your time had to be spent, shuttered, during, right. What do you think you missed out on?
Oh, very much the social part of it. One of the things we did as Kluge scholars, and of course I wasn't the only one, there were several people serving in several different positions. One of the things that we did, and it wasn't mandated, but one of the things that we did is we all had lunch together every week, either inside the Kluge Center or outside, 2 or 3 of us, and we would all go out every once in a while for a drink after work. It's the networking and social that I missed, that had to be moved online. There were several people I had intended on taking out for lunch or dinner specifically to talk about their areas of research in a way that you can't over a group lunch. But once the pandemic hit, I wasn't able to do that. And the Kluge Center brings people in from all around the country and frankly, all around the world. And some of the people I wanted to speak to had left for their home countries before we could get back together again. So the research is still there. I'm still, frankly, going into the Library of Congress occasionally, putting on my gloves and going through some of the books, the fragile books, doing more research. But what I missed most because of the pandemic was the social aspect and the networking that I would have done in face-to-face that you can't really do. You can try it online, but you can't really do it online the way you could if you were there in person. So that's what I missed the most.
Thank you.
Okay, I just saw Janna. How much time? See, Janna knows when she gets me talking, I'll talk for like the rest of the time, and I don't want to take up. How much time do we have left, Janna? Or are we
fine. I don't know. Corey, are you okay?
We're done.
See, we're done. So we'll have to save the Rosa Parks story for next year.
I'm sorry. I want to hear about this, but I think that we only have an hour. It was wonderful.
Thank you, everyone.
I guess I should say, just in closing, to say that if you have an opportunity to work at the Library of Congress at the Kluge Center, please take it. Please apply, because for me, it was the perfect bridge between daily writing and the research and the authoring that I will be doing in the future. Everyone at the Kluge Center was absolutely fabulous. Everyone in the Library of Congress as a whole, especially Dr. Hayden, everyone was welcoming and everyone was willing to help in everything that they could. So if you get a chance to work with Janna and Leroy, please take it.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.